All righty. Next on the presentation is Mr. Hurd, Student Board Member.
We
Ready?
appreciate this opportunity to provide a report on student member voting rights. And I want to begin this presentation by introducing Jason Wu, the state student member of the board, and Tyne Kidd, the Charles County Association of Student Council's president. I'm very grateful for both of these individuals giving us their time today and both making the drive, especially Jason from Montgomery County to be with us here today. Before we get into the proposal, I wanted to give a comprehensive background on what this position is, what created it, and what it looks like across the state. There's a lot of misconceptions, and I thought that before we get into the discussion and the proposal itself, it would be good to understand what truly is the student member of the board. The student member position was created in state law, and that is why our proposal is going to have to be done through the state legislature. I'm not going to read this word for word, but it's worth noting that what we see from day to day, number 4, I indicate a preference for or against any question for the board, and number 2, that the Charles County Association of Student Councils plays a role in the election process. And this position is an elected position, which I did see some misconceptions about. So for the election process, I'm going to let Tyne elaborate on that.
Hello, thank you all for having us today. So as you said, I'm Tyne Kidd, I'm the president of CCASC, and we take great pride in the way we run our elections. We've heard your all's concern regarding how can we guarantee an adequate candidate who actually gets to vote on SMOB. This is why we revitalized and modified our election process to accommodate to these concerns you all have, starting with the application. So each high school gets to choose one candidate to actually represent the high school and run for SMOB. If there are more than 3 candidates who actually want to run, we put them into an interview process with a selection committee. And this committee is made up of CCSC's president, our current SMOB, all of our current liaisons, and every current advisor. This means there's 17 members who actually have an input on if these students are even capable of doing the position before they even get to the election process. So from there, we check their eligibility by talking to their principals, and we also make sure they're actually active in SGA, because there's no point of running a position you don't actually comprehend. So we get all that done before we even start the election. In order to put in an application, they have to write a 500-word essay identifying and discussing an issue of a student concern and proposing a possible solution to this. This is so we can get an understanding if they know what they're getting into. We want to make sure our student member of the board actually has a connection with the students and actually has solutions to the problems the students face each day. Then after the essay, each candidate that actually moves on past that, they're interviewed by, once again, the selection committee, and that's made up of us. All participants that are interviewed, it's usually taking 15 to 10 minutes, and each question is actually curated for that specific candidate by going through their essays and talking to their advisors and finding out the certain information that we need from them. And within that selection committee, we score, and whoever has the highest score actually moves on, and there's 3 people. So if there's 7 high schools, 7 representatives, only 3 of them actually make it to the election. We do all this so we can make sure the candidate itself, like themselves, are actual good candidates for this position, because this position holds a lot of value, and they're the main representation on the board for us. And the results of our process of interview, we always make sure our CCAC advisor, the coordinator of all student activities, Mr. Lee, approves it. It's not just student-based, we also like to include the adults in the process. Then we get on to the actual election itself. This year, we're very proud to say that we've actually made a way that the election can reach every student in Charles County, well, every secondary student in Charles County. We do this by using Google Forms. With Google Forms, we apply the application domain required, so students have to put in their student ID and their password in order to actually vote. Before they actually vote, they have to go through a process of watching the campaign videos, which we upload on an unsolicited YouTube page, so it's non-biased whatsoever. No one has a leg up in the campaign, no one has a leg up in the election, so it's all an even playing field. And we also do a Q&A by letting students submit questions on a Google form, and our advisor skims through all the questions, selects the prime ones, and we have to answer those before we can even get to the election. And then when we get the election going, people vote via the Google form. We use the 1, 2, 3, the first, second, third process, where if you do not get 50% of first place, we consider the second candidate, and we do this over and over again until we actually get a candidate who got the majority. And then from there, once again, we include the adults. No matter what step we're on, we always run it past our CCSC advisor, we run it past our coordinator of student activities, Mr. Lee, and we just make sure you guys get a say in what's actually going on when we're selecting our SMOB. And even after the whole entire election process, once again, we do a step further. We make it mandatory for the newly elected SMOB to go to the May board meeting, because our election's held in May, and they must go to this board meeting alongside the previous SMOB or the current SMOB, because they're still in the position at the moment. And during that meeting, they have to take notes, they have to be vetted, they have to be curated for this position so they can properly assume that position. So we genuinely take these multiple steps to ensure that our candidate is prepared, to ensure that our candidate knows what they're getting themselves into, and just to make sure the SMOB position is filled by a valuable person.
That was really comprehensive, and I think you can imagine if we had that process for every elected official that exists in the history of the United States, we might have a lot of different candidates. So going next, I wanted to give a bird's eye view of our neighbors, because it's easy to look at what's going on in our county, but what does this look like in other counties? And later today, Jason is going to be a big help in understanding from a state's view, how do student members impact their boards of education, not just in Charles County, but across our larger community. So when we say full voting rights, we mean they act essentially as another member of the board. There is nothing off limits for them to vote on. In one case in Anne Arundel County, they even held the office of vice chairman. If you look, there's only 2 counties that go through with this full voting rights permission. And I put a star next to Montgomery County because they exclude negative personnel issues, which deals with immorality. But besides that, we essentially consider them full voting rights. When we look at some of our closer neighbors with partial voting rights, you can see that we have an extensive list, some Prince George's who touch us. And another concern that was brought to me when I had the discussion with all the board members on what this proposal looks like is we would have, in some cases, an even number of board members voting on proposals. And Jason is going to be able to get more into this after the presentation, but we would not be the first, and we certainly wouldn't be the last to have an even number. And even in Montgomery County, they have 8 members, which would be the exact same number as us, as well as Howard County. So I have heard the concerns about we're a smaller board, what would 8 members look like? These counties can answer that for us. Now, the best part, our proposal, what is it? Because we've heard a lot of talk about it, and for this, I want to read it verbatim, because I think it's really important that we understand exactly what we've put out there into this space. Our proposal says, a proposal to amend the annotated code of Maryland so that the student member on the Charles County Board of Education has voting rights in all matters except personnel. The student member serves as a representative of the students enrolled in the school system. This would bring Charles County in line with several other jurisdictions in the state which grant their student member voting rights. This is our proposal verbatim. This is all that's out there. Because if this proposal moves forward, it will be turned into a bill. But right now, this is what exists in this space. And before we move into that process, we're here with you all today to hear the discussion that happens. Next, what does that mean? In practice, that means our proposal will include voting rights on the budget, academic eligibility, code of conduct, school calendar, curriculum, and any other non-staff related issues that were to come to a vote before the board. Our proposal excludes personnel evaluations, teachers union negotiations, staff and hiring appointments, staff disciplinary action, and any other staff-related issue. And our proposal is intended, with the personnel exclusion, to include anything that touches personnel. how did we get here? In the present, student leaders submitted a proposal to the county commissioners for their state legislative package. Every year, as I'm sure you guys know, the county commissioners send and put together bills for the General Assembly to approve that our county in its local jurisdiction has said, we want this. We've begun as a part of that process, and we hit the timeline to possibly have this included in their state legislative package if they move forward with it. After that point, after it being proposed, I have reached out and had the important discussions with all the board members on this board, and we've had lots of meaningful discussion that I'm sure will also come out today after this presentation. And in addition to this, student leaders have met with other local officials, including but not limited to commissioners and state delegates and state senators. In the past, CCASC sets student member voting rights as a priority in their platform. This isn't something that's new, and it has always been the heart of student government to provide that fundamental say. And we felt that the time was right and that the cards were lining up in order for us to bring this to your attention and bring this into the community this year. But the question always comes up, well, how did this start? It started a long time ago. In 1975, Anne Arundel County granted their student member full voting rights. And I know you're probably looking at that thinking that's a typo. We triple checked that. Anne Arundel County has led the forefront on this, and they've seen nothing but benefits and improvements to their decision-making process. Since that point, other counties have begun to move forward and adopt similar proposals, some, like Montgomery County, trying to bring it as close as possible to Anne Arundel's system, and others picking and choosing what they're comfortable with. But in all cases, as we will hear today, it has been beneficial to the decision-making process, and ultimately the decisions are better for everyone involved because of the student input. Where are we going? So what does this process look like? As I mentioned earlier, the first step for us was submitting our proposal to the commissioners. Now, as you can see, we are seeking your recommendation, and that has an invaluable input on this decision. You all obviously are going to be one of the most affected groups by this decision, and we think it's important that you all have the say, the opportunity to discuss it, and most importantly, the opportunity to tell us what your concerns are with our proposal so that we may compromise. Next, going on to step 2, which we will hopefully see in the future, the commissioners would vote on submitting the proposal as part of the state legislative package. From that point, the proposal, as I said, would be included in the state legislative package and go through Annapolis, the General Assembly process, the vetting through the committees, and then finally the floor vote. If it wasn't included in the state legislative package, it is also technically a possibility that our state delegation could sponsor this, and that is also useful if, for example, we miss a timeline or we miss our window of opportunity for a state legislative package. Next, I just wanted to splatter up there in the news the different ways that our student members across the state have been able to positively impact their community. And I know there's so many different ways we could go more in depth with this, but I just wanted to make a collage so you all could see that this isn't just a process issue, this is a product issue. We are going to see benefits. We're not just going to see the decision-making process include students, we're going to see the results of the decisions being ever more inclusive of the student voice and taking those considerations with tangible weight. And I just wanted to highlight especially Matt Post from Montgomery County. Through his role, he was able to get involved not only on a county level or a state level, but a national level. He advocated for national change in DC. And when we give our student members that capacity, it doesn't overwhelm them, they fill it. They fill that role. And if we give this role in our county that capacity, I can promise you, we are not going to maintain. We are going to expand and become more and more of an asset for you all to use in your decision-making process and be more involved in that decision-making process as stakeholders. And then the million-dollar question, why should we do this, right? And I've spent a lot of time talking, but I wanted to hand it over first to Tyne about why should we do this.
I've lived in a lot of counties in my life. I've moved around, I've been in multiple school systems, but Charles County, this county is just such an amazing county to be in. The student body itself is just the most determined and the most capable student body I've ever met. If you go to any person in CCSC, any delegate, you can hold a conversation with them about legislative processes, about youth-related bills, things prominent to us right now. It's because we actually concern ourselves with what's going on around us. We actually have our wonderful little phones to inform us about anything we really want to know. Even if we're not knowledgeable about the topic, you can guarantee we're going to go home and look it up so we can have our conversation tomorrow. We have the capacity to do this. This is why we should do this. Right now, communication between students and our board, our teachers, is at an all-time low. And it's not any of our faults. We are faced with a predicament that none of us wanted to be in, but right now we really need to have a say in what's going on because you guys are the ones who create the change. Our student member of the board, they are the bridge between us and you guys. They are the bridge between the people that create the change and the people that are directly affected by the change, us, the students. We're just asking you to support us, support our bridge to actually get things more and get students more involved, to get our input on matters that actually affect us, like eligibility, like curriculum and code of conduct. We always talk about how we want to change the dress code or talk about how it's kind of difficult to be eligible for things when you have your own situations at home. But no one's hearing us but each other. Only our peers are hearing us. If our student member of the board, no matter now or later in the future, this is the first step to get there. This is the first step for our student member of the board to have a vote on matters, not any extra matters, nothing personnel, none of that, just stuff that actually affects the students directly. That's all we're asking for. This is why we should do this.
And then Jason, the state student member of the board, I also wanted to give him an opportunity to elaborate.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Ian. Good afternoon, Chairman McGraw, Superintendent Hill, and members of the Charles County Board of Education. My name is Jason Wu. I'm a senior at Poolsville High School and the current student member on the Maryland State Board of Education. I'd like to sincerely thank you for serving the students of Charles County, Maryland, and urge you to support efforts to expand the voting rights of the student member. The student member, also known as the SMOB, serves as the voice for all primary and secondary students within each local school system. I, as well as the SMOBs of Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Hartford County, Howard County, Prince George's County, and Montgomery County, possess the ability to vote on most, if not all, matters that come before our respective boards of education. Throughout the past 4 months since starting my term, I've been able to speak with and engage perspectives from students, parents, staff, faculty, and other constituents of our schools. Students in particular have reached out to me through hundreds of emails, phone calls, and social media messages every month. When the Board of Education voted on board priorities for the year, my peers told me their stories on struggling with mental health in schools. When the board worked to address the sports season being impacted by COVID-19, my peers informed me that they wanted to find a safe and responsible way to keep playing the sports that they loved. When the state board was tasked with setting guidelines for virtual learning, my peers expressed their concerns with getting access to technology at home. Hearing these perspectives of students have become an integral part of my role in representing the over 900,000 students of Maryland, and voting on these issues at hand allow me to put words into actions. Today, in these unprecedented times, we've seen the role that students play as an integral part of the policy making that directly impacts them. Implementing voting rights gives the students the ability to make their voices heard. Implementing voting rights gives students the ability to affect real change. And implementing voting rights gives the student member the ability to do what's right for the most and for all of the student body as a whole. In closing, I urge you to support the voting rights proposal for the Charles County SMOB. For the sake of perhaps our largest constituency, the students, We must ensure that they have an active role in making the decisions that impact them on a daily basis. Enabling the student member to vote on the matters that come before the board does just that. Thank you.
And before we get into discussion and questions, I also, if it's okay with Ms. McGraw, would like to give the liaisons an opportunity to comment.
Yes, go right ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Christina Walker, and I am a middle senior at Lackey High School. I have been Lackey High School's liaison since the end of my freshman year. I have spent 2 full years sitting as a liaison on this board. This is the 3rd student member of the board I've seen in action. Every member I've seen has started out the year with goals. Prisha, the student member of the board my sophomore year, wanted a more equitable dress code. Dewan, the student member of the board my junior year, wanted more representation for minorities and recognition from the board for said minorities. In order to complete their goals, they had to make numerous committees, work through adults, and present their ideas to a board that they cannot currently vote on. This year, Ian Hurd, the current student member of the board, strives to give the students a voice, and he wants to start with the process of obtaining voting rights for Charles County. It is very important, as the largest percent of people who are affected by the Board of Education's decisions, that we, the students, have a strong voice and a powerful voice. It is imperative that our voices matter, and we do everything we can to be heard. We have demonstrated that the students are responsible enough to manage a vote that not only represents the students, but benefits and takes into account all members of the community. And we will not let you down.
Good afternoon, Board of Education members. My name is Eric Valentine. As the liaison representing La Plata High School, I've been able to attend many conferences with CCAC and MASC. Through these experiences, I have made friends with student leaders from all across the state of Maryland. I've talked with them about the importance of student advocacy and learned a lot about their own efforts at their schools and how important a vote is to these issues. We've all witnessed student leaders' efforts and hard work here in our own county. Our student member of the board and CCAC officers past and present care so much about improving our school system for every student. With your support on this proposal, we can take the work of student leaders to the next level. We will improve our democracy by giving them a vote and real say on the issues that affect them directly. Thank you for your consideration of this important topic, and we appreciate you allowing us to have this discussion.
Welcome.
Questions and comments?
Board members? Go ahead, Mr. Hancock.
First, want to thank you all for being here. You, the 3 of you, and 5 of you, if you count the liaisons, are certainly the future of government in this county, state, and country, and that is promising when you look at the current landscape. I can promise you that. So, and the way that you professionally uphold yourselves and the way you present your case, it's something to be commended. I want to thank you for that. Just a few questions. You and I have spoke on this, and I've told you, my thoughts on it. I could go one way or the other on it. Hypothetically speaking, you're a senior in high school. You make a vote. You get an email from an angry teacher that's one of your teachers. How would you handle that? Because that will happen.
Yeah. I think I would handle it with the same temperament that any adult board member would. And if you wouldn't mind, Jason could comment the kind of emails he receives as a state student member.
That'd be great.
Sure thing. So I'd say I receive a couple dozen messages around every week from not only students, but also teachers and parents and just all constituencies. They come through emails, mostly actually social media messages, and I respond to them. I try to respond to them as soon as possible and make sure that it's professional and that I respond to their concerns and make sure to convey it to the board as a whole.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Other comments, questions regarding the proposal? Mr. Lucas?
So I'll echo the comments by Mr. Hancock. Each of you represents yourself very well. It's very encouraging to see how you handle yourself. And on your slide where you talk about what the proposal includes and what it excludes, I like that slide. For me, and just to bring it up, not that we're going to solve it here, but the budget and teachers' negotiations are not, one could argue they're not directly related, but they're certainly related. And so that might be something that as a board, we would have to discuss. But there's some things up there that, quite frankly, I never thought about it that initially that were good, like the code of conduct and the school calendar, and the academic eligibility, and there's a few other things. I think it would do well to have your voice heard on that. But I just make the point to my fellow board members about the budget and the relation of that with negotiations.
Any other comments, Ms. Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of questions. Just bear with me because I'm trying to get a visual here. So we received several emails, and some of the emails included reference to systematic and structural change. Could you have you seen these emails? Do you know?
Are you referring to
why
public
your
comments?
fellow-
It came through public forum.
Yes. It came through public forum, and they alluded to systematic and structural change. And so I made the assumption that maybe through interaction with your colleagues that what are the common themes of concerns, and I picked up on this numerous references to systematic and structural change. So you're not aware of what that's referring to?
I will give them both an opportunity to comment on it as well, but my understanding in that reference would be we're talking about this system, the Board of Education itself, and the decision-making process. And when they're saying a change, naturally there's going to be a change in the flow of the conversation if students have a voice. And with that regard, I also wanted to bring it back here to a conversation I had with Ms. Abel, which I thought was really interesting. And it's the fact that the student member would be held accountable by students, but the decisions they would make and that vote that they would have would impact all members of our school system and our community. And I think that Jason has shown, and we will show to you, that we have a commitment to that vote not just benefiting students directly, but we understand the importance of that vote in affecting the school system as a whole beneficially. I know that there's a lot of times when I provide in my advisory capacity very student-oriented opinions. And when you look at it in the general scope, you can see that it weighs a little different. I understand that, and I think future student members would also understand that in their vote, that although they are held accountable by the students, they vote for the good of the entire school system. So I want to assure you with the comments and the way I'm taking them that systemically and through this system, we are going to improve it and increase representation for the entire community, but have a board member who is held accountable by the students. That's the difference. If the students are upset with you, they can tell their parents, but who do they hold accountable? They hold the student member accountable. And if you give us that capacity, we won't disappoint. And I also want to give Tyne the opportunity to comment if you have anything.
Yes, I definitely agree with Ian when he said when we're referring to systematic, when they were referring to systematic, they meant the board itself. Because when the student member has a chance to vote, it will be a change. It will be an even number. It will be a lot of changes, but we know that we can handle it. We know that we have the capacity to actually have this responsibility and have this privilege. And also, when they said change, I know there's a lot of things that each student has to go through on a daily basis that's due to the things we don't have a vote on, like the code of conduct that directly affects our dress code. And I know a lot of us, we don't have options when it comes to clothes. We don't have the most diligent lifestyle to be picky, choosing what we have to wear. And then all of us, not all of us, but a certain denomination, a certain demographic of people when it comes to stuff like that, we are more targeted when it comes to dress code because we have a certain body type, and of course, we're going to get more reprimanded on it because of this. And when you see that happen on a daily basis within the schools in Charles County, you can find a case like this in every school in Charles County. I can guarantee you that. And to know that we can complain about it, we can talk to our teachers about it, we can tell our student member about it, but that doesn't actually enact change. That doesn't actually count our vote. It doesn't actually count our input. So when people are referring to we want that systematic change, they're definitely referring to they just want the student member to have this vote so the system itself will be more accommodating to what the students need.
And real quick, Jason, do you have anything to add about what that change looks like?
Absolutely. I agree with the comments from Tyne and Ian before me. But I believe in Charles County this year they're implementing a new voting system where all secondary
Yes.
students are electing the student member. And so not only does the student member serve to represent students in all constituents, but they're also getting that firsthand experience as a student themselves. So they're not just talking about the logistics on the board, but they get to experience really what that's like translating into real life. And I think that's a perspective, a really unique perspective that the student member offers, and adding voting rights to that perspective is something that's definitely really important.
I just wanted to show you, at the top we put the image. If you have it on your computers or you really squint, maybe you can see it. That's our online ballot that we used.
Yes.
And a student going to vote after viewing the videos would see that screen. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Just a few more. Can you, I'm trying to understand. So we're having this discussion. You're a member of the board. You're not a voting member of the board. Can you explain the reason why you didn't bring this suggestion to the board for discussion before submitting your proposal to the county commissioners, which is a separate governing board? Wouldn't it behoove you to kind of have a conversation internally before going externally? And I'm just trying to understand the perspective.
So I've heard a lot about that issue, and I can completely understand the concern, but we're still navigating the legislative process, and from our limited experience navigating what a bill looks like, we still feel like we're in the preliminary stages, where if you have a recommendation, we will certainly take it into account, and the possibility exists to amend this proposal. Versus if we came to you with a written bill, it would be a lot harder to have this discussion and for it to be as flexible as it is now. So I'm sorry that you feel that we should have come to you sooner, and in hindsight, we absolutely would have, but we are hoping that you still see that potential for this proposal to evolve and take on something that can benefit students, but assure you guys that we can handle it.
I see the potential. That's not the issue. And it's just, if you're already an existing member of the board, voting or no voting, we are always open, are always receptive to input, whether something needs to be voted on or not voted on. And so conversations can always take place without a stamp, shall we say, of approval. And so with that said, can you describe to me how much of a student workload, what are your student requirements, both during and after school, and time management issues, to be committed to being a board member? Because some of this requires a lot of extra reading and research, and so can you describe what your current academic schedule is like and what your after-school activities are like? So we have a perspective of your
I'll highlight
responsibilities
mine,
now.
and then I'll give Jason that opportunity too.
Okay?
So, being a board member is legally a part-time job, right? And a lot of you I know are either retired or hold full-time jobs. It is similar in that regard like being a student, because I go through a work day, at school, and a lot of times the students who do hold these positions are academically, they push themselves. And I take AP classes, but not once has that impeded my ability to represent students. And I think you can see that outside of the boardroom, I continue to represent the students. I'm holding a forum, not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday, on what digital learning is going to look like. Workload or not, it will not get in the way of us representing our students. And Jason drove from Montgomery County to Tyne. We all went to school today, and we still showed up here. I went to school today. And I think we have shown the commitment, and we will continue to show the commitment that we can manage our workloads. And I'll give Jason the opportunity to elaborate.
Sure. So just speaking back to the election process, and sort of the way that I got into this role was first with a voting student delegation of around, I'd say 300 to 500 students from all over the state. After that was the appointment by our governor, Larry Hogan. But the students, especially here in Charles County, they understand the weight. Not only does the county SMOB and the state SMOB hold, but they also know that it takes a lot of time and dedication to represent their perspectives. This year, I've taken an abbreviated schedule to accommodate for this role and to really put a focus on reaching out to students and getting their perspectives and conveying it to the board. This year, we've had virtual meetings so far, so it's probably saved me 4 hours driving back and forth to Baltimore every month. But just through the election process and how extensive it is and getting onto the role, students understand that they want to elect someone who is dedicated to the role. And I believe, and I firmly believe, that the electors, that the students who are actually electing the SMOB know the value that the position holds and will elect the one that they believe will dedicate their time to the position fully.
Definitely, to add on to what Jason just said, during our election process, the people who are applying for this position, we offer them, well, we don't offer them, we make it mandatory for them to read through their responsibilities and the list of their duties. We want to make sure they know exactly what they're getting themselves into, so we don't have a candidate that's going for this position who does not have the time to do it. So just to address your question, we want to make sure they know the extent of the responsibilities, and if or when we get the voting right, we will add to those responsibilities so they can know that it is a process. There's going to be a lot of reading. You have to be just as hard as working as the adults on that board because you have a vote now.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
Ms. Abel?
I just want to echo my fellow board members with saying that all of you represent yourself very well. I enjoyed the presentation. It was very well put together. And during our conversation, I told you what my concerns were. You have addressed all of my concerns, and I appreciate that. Job well done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Lucas?
Thank you. Just a quick question. On the first slide, I guess it is, the election process. Perhaps Mr. Schwartz can chime in. There you go.
This one or the next one?
Election process.
That one. But the fact that it's been delegated to CCASC, where is that codified? Is that in our policy anywhere, or is it just a matter of practice? Yeah.
It's not policy, it's a process that was approved by the board. And I think that process has been in place for quite a while. I'm not sure when the board actually approved it.
Okay.
I think number 2 of the state law on the previous slide gives a little bit of detail about what the election process looks like.
I also want to mention the fact that, at least with what Mr. Schwartz is alluding to, that it has been approved in years past. I think that goes to what Tyne is saying about how there's a committee, a selection committee, and the process that narrows down the candidates, and that CCASC has been held responsible for who votes for this position. And we've been responsible for getting those kids on the bus, bringing them to Thomas Stone, and getting those ballots casted. And the point we're trying to make here is this year was a year unlike any else, and we held our elections digitally. I was elected digitally. I made a video. Students casted ballots through that form right there. And the point we're trying to get at is the only barrier between us and this rolling out to our entire secondary student population is the link. There's no need to change the process. We've got it. We've hit the sweet spot, and we're ready to send out the link. And we're making that commitment that we want to pursue that, but we're also trying to say that if the board is unhappy with the direction or you feel like we're not making enough steps towards that, the decision ultimately rests with you. So there's no fear in us turning around and saying, gotcha, we're not going to do that anymore. You can have confidence that you have the say on this.
Ms. Battle Lockhart.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your presentation. As always, I'm very impressed when you all come up front and share your information. As we've had our conversation, you know I support any student's growth, and this is a growth process for all of you, and congratulations on your new role. I think all the questions that you are answered in your presentation outside of, like you said, our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to piggyback on Tina's question, as you shared with me, it was just a matter of you found the information out, there was a timeline, and you was trying to chase the timeline without thinking to come to us. And with that being said, I think when you find yourself passionate about what you want to do and I want to grow in it, and as I've always told you, just chase it and see what happens with it. So I'm excited that you brought the two with you to support you in the process to make it a clear and concise presentation so everybody can really understand, why the question, why do we want to do this?
$1 million question.
So thank you guys for sharing it so, articulating it so well. And I totally support you in whatever this decision may be.
Well, I'd like to say thank you for the presentation you all did. Each and every one of you did an excellent job. This is a very important issue that's been brought to us today, one that's going to have consequences down the road. And today, well, actually last night when I saw the PowerPoint was the first that I've seen the specifics of it. And I think it warrants some discussion by board members. I want to understand, what would you like from us today? Where would you like to see this go? I hadn't thought about the issue that Mr. Lucas brought up about the budget being tied with teacher negotiations, so that's an aha for me. So I go back to what is it that you would like to hear from us today? What decision or that, plus how would the board like to move? I at least need to know how the board wants to move. So first you tell me, what do you want from us today?
Obviously, in a perfect world, we would love to hear that you guys have a recommendation in favor of this proposal and you back it. That's our ultimate goal.
Okay.
And we want to provide as much information as possible for you to reach that conclusion.
Okay. Board members, how do you want to move forward? Mrs. Zabel?
What is your timeline?
So originally, the commissioners have delayed their vote on this being included in the state legislative package to accommodate this board meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure, what the return to vote on it, when that will take place. But my understanding is that that would be contingent on you all delivering a verdict and a recommendation.
Okay.
I think it warrants more discussion
It
on the
does.
board. I don't think that we are prepared to vote one way or another today. That's just my opinion. But I kind of wanted to know what the commissioner's timeline was for this. Thank you for answering.
No
And because I forgot earlier, thank you so much, Mr. Wu, for traveling down from Montgomery County.
I might also add that Senator Ellis's office reached out to me regarding proposed legislation, and he too is waiting for us to have a discussion with you as well as with the other board members before moving forward with his legislation. So there is, I guess, I don't know whether it's January timeline. So sometime.
Yeah.
So you had a quick question?
I was just going to echo my colleagues. I think we need to have some discussion about this. And Ian, we've had this conversation about teachable moments, and that going forward, you're going to have many situations where you're going to have to collaborate or advocate for an issue that you believe in, and not that there are folks that are for or opposed to your idea, but you sometimes have to bring everybody up on the same page. And so I think this is the reason why I was saying we're now having to backtrack to have an understanding of what the proposal is. And more importantly, I think my fellow board members, we need to have a full understanding of the consequences if we go with all or maybe some. But all of you've been very helpful in answering the questions we have for today. So I'm hopeful, but we do need a little more time to kind of weigh the pros and cons and understand the consequences.
So that, Mr. Hancock?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to chime in. When I look at what the proposal includes, there are certainly issues on here that I think it would be valuable to have your voice weighed in. I want to agree with my colleagues over there, Mr. Lucas and Ms. Abel, about the budget. I certainly think that wouldn't be one thing I would recommend is maybe cleaning up the language a little bit on your proposal, except personnel. I mean, that's a tricky one. Personnel can almost be included in most everything if you really got down to the bare bones of it. I still don't know how I feel about it. I do think it warrants more conversation. Just on our end, you represent the students extremely well, all of you do. But we are held accountable by every citizen of the county, and they are not afraid to let us know how they feel. And I need to do my research on my end with who I feel my constituents are to see what their feelings are on this, because this is going to have a huge impact on students and every member of this county. Aside from that, thank you so much.
My only response to that, and we appreciate the compliments so much. We put a lot of work into this, and we're really happy to see that it was able to help you guys in your journey through where you land. But with regard to, the proposal being more specific, this is, I've never had to make a bill before, and my understanding of the legislative process was that the proposal that we provide is an encapsulation of the general idea. This isn't a bill yet. It has not been written into a bill. And I think, a big concern I've heard is about this being more specific. And I'm not going to claim to be Mr. Schwartz. I mean, that takes years to get to that point. But my understanding is that it would be more specific in a bill format. But this is the proposal, just putting it out there.
That's true. Sorry, Madam
No,
Chair.
go ahead.
You're absolutely right. But when it gets to that bill format, we have zero control over what that's going to come out of. And it could be, we could say we're for it, and then all of a sudden it lands on state law, and it's not a thing that we would ever support. And that's just the way politics works. That's why it is such a concern to me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And to speak to that, Ian, when I read the proposal when it was proposed to the commissioners, to me, it read personnel. you excluded personnel. You want complete voting rights excluding personnel. So this is, for me, is more specific in that it would include, but what did that look like? I didn't know until today. So to me, these topics that you have here, to include budget, academic eligibility, and so forth, need to have some more discussion.
Well, we
Yeah.
were just trying to give an example, and I want to be really clear that we have not, switched and baited you guys with this proposal. That language is the exact same language we've been using throughout this. And as for how do we derive this final proposal and the idea, we based it off of Montgomery County, which excludes negative personnel issues dealing with immorality. And we extrapolated that to include all personnel because we wanted to show a commitment to voting on issues that directly affect students. And I think, as Dr. Hill was saying earlier, the school system has two facets, providing public education and serving as an employer. And we wanted to try to take out that employer aspect that you all serve as board members and get it focused on that public education being provided.
Okay. So with that being said, another question?
I was just going to ask, would this warrant a work session to work through the details on our end?
Say that again, sir?
Would this warrant us having a work session possibly to really focus some time on this and for us to collaborate as a board to figure out what we want to do from here?
That's what I was about to
Okay,
propose. I said,
very
with
good.
that being
Thank you.
said, we do have a work session, a hold for a work session on November the 23rd. Is it the board's desire, or consensus of the board, to move forward to hold a work session to address student voting rights? So raise your hand if you're in favor.
My calendar to come up.
Okay,
I know that's slow.
okay.
For some
November the,
reason, I'm thinking there's another,
it's a hold. For November, it's on our calendars for a hold. To a possible work session.
Try my best to be here. That's the week before Thanksgiving. I'll do everything in my power to be here that day. But don't, do what you want to do. I should be here.
Consensus? All those that would be in favor? All right, so let's right now,
I will certainly do my best.
and we do understand. You're right. So November the 23rd, we'll have a work session to address student voting rights, and would you be available to be prepared to answer more questions?
Absolutely. yeah.
Okay,
And I'll follow up with looking into what the translation process is going to look like, turning this into a bill.
okay,
So I'll have more information about that for the work session.
okay.
You guys have, Jason?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Chairman McGraw, Ian, and board members for allowing us to speak on this today.
Sure.
I'm definitely looking forward to hearing the discussions coming up on this topic in the future. And I'd be honored to come down here again to speak on my perspective and sort of provide a state perspective on other topics or this topic in particular in the future. So thank you so much.
Okay, you're most welcome. Anything else? We thank you all very much. Job well done today.
We thank you for the opportunity.
Sure. Okay,